Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's LinkedIn Live. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I'm the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, and I am really excited to be collaborating once again with the amazing WiseTech Global team. And today we're talking about going beyond Drayage TMS. Now, despite being a fundamental part of the supply chain, many would say that drayage has been historically overlooked. But according to Inbound Logistics, it's a new dawn for the industry. Organizations are coming to understand drayage as the foundation that underpins the entire life cycle of a shipment. And as we all know, you can't build on shaky foundations. So, innovators and tech providers are developing new solutions and technologies that are revolutionizing the drayage landscape. From facilitating visibility and streamlining workflows to managing compliance and reducing costs, new drayage tech is rising up to solve historical challenges, to change the way the industry operates, and to strengthen those all important supply chain foundations. And I'm joined by three organizations who are doing just that. So with me today, I have Travis Barnier, business lead for DrayMaster, a digital rate management tool. We also have Mark Picarello, managing director of SecurSpace, an online marketplace for on-demand truck, trailer, and container parking and storage. And last but not least, we have Dennis Lane, Managing Director of Trinium Technologies, a leading Dray TMS provider. So welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for joining me and being part of the conversation today.
Thanks, Sarah. Happy to be here again.
Yeah, nice to be here, Sarah. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Good to see you again.
All right. Now, before we begin, we will be having a Q&A a little bit later towards the end of the session. So we want to hear from you. Don't be shy. Put all your questions as they arise into the chat section on your screen, and we will be keeping an eye on them and getting to as many as we can later on. But for now, we want to know where everybody is tuning in from. So give us an emoji flag or type in the comments where you're tuning in, because we want to hear from you. All right. Well, now it's time to dive in. So let's start by setting the scene for the discussion. Let's get an overview of what the market looks like in 2024. So Dennis, I'm going to start with you, then we'll go to Mark. How much are local and regional drayage companies feeling the impact of the continuing global supply chain disruptions that we're seeing? I mean, the economic struggles, the geopolitical upheavals. What does the impact look like for those SMEs?
Well, 2023 was a rough year. You know, for the companies in our space, we during that downturn, usually we'll see some contraction, which we've seen with our customers. Some companies really went out of business, but the drayage space is really resilient, and a lot of these companies have really right-sized their fleets and their internal headcount, and they're ready to compete in 2024. From a forecast standpoint, we're starting to hear some optimism for 2024 as far as overall volume, specifically the largest trade, which is the Pacific eastbound trade. We've recently seen some volume increases specifically to the West Coast. Now, the economists are not sure if that's a shift based on some of the global issues that we have in the Red Sea, the Panama Canal, and then the presumptive labor issues potentially on the East Coast, or if it's an actual increase in the West Coast. We'll see as first quarter numbers come out, but hopefully the more optimistic projections will win out in 2024.
Great, thank you. What about you, Mark?
Yeah, I think as Dennis noted, I mean, container volumes started the year slow, as they often do anyway this time of the year after the busy season. But as most of the industry have noted, and looking out, the volumes are definitely up overall and starting to increase. There just hasn't been as much congestion with all the changes in different ports. It'd be interesting to see, also as Dennis noted, with some of the things going on and the increase on the West Coast, whether that keeps going. It's also, with the changes of how inventory is moving through, some containers are moving through faster. And yet, again, we just had what happened in Baltimore, which will impact, everything yet again. So it'll be interesting to see how all those things kind of work out.
Yeah, and it impacts it in a regional way, right? So it really just depends on where you're situated, where your inventory is situated,
Right.
what that looks like. But it's affecting people differently no matter where you are across the country. So, Mark, what about the storage? Because there's a real lack of affordable and accessible real estate, right? How is a lack of storage for trucks, trailers, and containers impacting both cost and maybe even driver job satisfaction?
Yeah, no, I would say even with my comments above, or the comments Dennis and I have made about the volumes, there's still a lot going in and out of the ports. And, in those areas, real estate is at a premium. There's not a lot.
Mhm.
And, whether it's finding a place to store a container before it goes to the ultimate destination, and yet, all the things going on with drivers and parking and safety. I mean, just look at, I think the federal government said like 750 million they're putting towards, especially in and around the port and drayage areas, solving the parking problem. So,
Right.
whether it's storage or parking of trucks, it is having an impact. And it does. I mean, if you visited the ports, you can see how long the truckers stay in line to get in and out. I mean, it's definitely impacting them a lot.
Well, yeah, and those long wait times means that we can't turn them fast enough
Exactly.
to be able to keep product moving. Travis, what do you think about this one?
I was just going to say that storage isn't the only variable cost here. That talking about for the truckers, think about fuel, accessorials, or toll charges, just to name a few. But then trying to pass those charges on to the customer, if the said charges were not even a part of the original quote. And point being that you need to account for all potential charges as much as possible, anyways, during the quoting process, and that's going to end up leading to fewer invoice discrepancies and quicker pay times.
Yeah, nobody likes surprises, especially when it comes to costs, right? So, Travis, I'm going to come back to you for this one because I think as companies struggle with some of these issues that we're talking about, they're also facing a lot more competition, right? More authority, more regulation than ever before. How are some of these issues like impending vehicle electrification regulation? Wow, that's a mouthful. For example, how is that impacting businesses? What do people need to know about that?
I would, kind of picking up where I left off, and I'll get to the electrification, but invoice discrepancies, they're one of the biggest disruptors for good customer relationships.
Mhm.
And we've always said the easiest customer to maintain is the one you already have. So with the, industry being more competitive, you have more people fighting over less and less freight under the current situation. It's forcing them to run as lean as possible to win business and not to mention profitable business. So to that point, we're seeing more revocations and we're seeing new authorities now. Uh, some of the industry consolidation as larger carriers buy up smaller ones.
Mhm.
And of course, good profitability makes it more attractive to be acquired, which is what we're talking about, and gives you the leverage to acquire if that's the direction you're going. It's also going to put you in a better position to invest in the electrification because we all know, I mean, it's going to start in California, but eventually it's going to be the new normal.
Is it?
I think so. I think there's going to be challenges throughout the process, as we already see, and I know Dennis will probably talk more about that in another scenario. But yeah, I think it's going to go that way.
There's so many things to think about, when we think about some of the disruptions that are happening, when we're thinking about rules and regulations and then invoicing, there's so much to think about. There's so much to do to be able to be successful in a market like that. So, with that backdrop in mind, let's dive a little bit deeper into the challenges that you're all facing every day for your customers. I'm going to go to each of you in turn and maybe ask you to give us an overview of your technology and then really give us a feel for what your customers are facing, right? Those obstacles that you're trying to help them overcome. So, Dennis, I'm going to start with you. What does the technology do? How does it help your customers? How has the tech kind of evolved with those customer needs? And what are some of the operational challenges that you tackle?
From a Trinium perspective, we're a TMS provider. So we're an enterprise software application for port and rail drayage companies, really of all sizes. We've been around since 2001 with the main focus on really filling the void in the market for transportation software for container drayage companies. Until early 2000s, most of the software was truckload or LTL focus and really a square peg in a round hole for drayage. And we've really never left that space, even since being acquired by Wistek in 2018. From an evolution standpoint, our product philosophy is really to give our customers the best of both worlds. So we have a well-defined product roadmap, which has inputs from our internal teams and ideas from our teams, but also from customers and from a user advisory group standpoint. So the system grows over time based on pain points that are functionality that's targeted towards Dray pain points. And then secondly, we provide the flexibility to modify the software for specific customer requirements. So that's kind of the best of both worlds. We do incorporate the modifications into the central code base. And we have a new single version concept where we're releasing versions once a month. So now customers get the latest and greatest faster. Wow. So it's a really big project that we had that hit its stride last year. From an operational challenges standpoint, it's pretty broad, high level. I like to note the high customer expectations from whether our drayage customers are dealing with BCOs or 3PLs or freight forwarders. More and more access to data is required for customers, whether they want EDI or APIs or they want custom reports. The drayage space is usually operating on tight margins as well. So if a dray operator lets something lapse that goes into a day of detention, their margins could be gone on that business. So being able to control things like per diem and demurrage and rail storage and manage your chassis costs. And then as we were mentioning earlier, dealing with compliance is always an issue. We've had to do some changes with the system to be AB5 compliant for the owner operator ban and things like that.
Amazing. I like what you said about the updates because we're so used to getting those updates through like iPhones and different things like that. And you're actually bringing that to the supply chain market and allowing for new updates and new features to come to the clients on a regular basis. I really like that. All right, Mark, you're up next. Give us an overview of the brand, the technology, how you help your customer. What are some of the operational challenges that you solve for?
Great. Thanks, Sarah. So yeah, SecurSpace is a leading online marketplace for what we'll call container storage and truck parking. And really, it allows companies with unutilized yard space, what we call suppliers, to list that space where other companies or truckers that need to park or store containers, what we call buyers, can find it and book that space, whether it's a day, a week, a month, all varies based on the companies. And this really allows our customers on the supply side to really monetize space. Right? They've got yard space. They're probably not utilizing it 100%. And it's just sitting there. It's a cost. And now they can actually generate revenue from it. And the buyers get access to space that wouldn't otherwise have without having to buy real estate in the most expensive areas. And the system handles all the booking, billing of credit card, ACH, whatever is chosen, and then automatically pushes the revenue to the suppliers. So everyone's happy. It's all online. Everyone can see it. From an evolution perspective, I would just say it's continued to evolve a lot on the supply side, allowing suppliers to manage what is available for space, what they have, what they're going to allow to be published, reporting and visibility as to what's being used, revenue. And on the buy side, it's mostly been about user interface, right? We want to make it as easy as possible for someone to book space. And that's really where we spend a lot of our time. I would say challenges, one of the largest is, as I said, around maintaining accurate inventory, both on supply side and buy side. Like what's in the yard, what do I have there? And what do I have for space? And on the buy side, where's my equipment or merchandise if I'm, the actual importer? So a lot of reporting and visibility around that. And then security. So really increasing the kinds of attributes on the supply side when we look at a location. Is it secure? Is it fenced? Is it paved? All those things mean something to someone who's going to book the space, again, depending on what they're carrying. So I would say those are the biggest challenges that we're trying to help them with.
Yeah. Does it have good lighting?
Yeah. No, that's right. Cameras, video, surveillance. Is there security there 24/7? I mean, all those questions come up, and we're trying to add those attributes so that, they can see that.
Yeah, because some of those trailers, they carry a lot of very expensive inventory. But I like the fact that we're utilizing space that is already there. Right. And that people have that is just sort of lying dormant that can be utilized and used. And it's kind of a new revenue stream for some people, which is great.
And we found that some of them did it anyway, but it was relationship based. And now they're dealing with all the billing and collections, and
Right.
by publishing it through the marketplace, all that goes away. They really can focus on what they do
Yeah.
and allow the marketplace to handle the rest.
And have that revenue stream move really smoothly. I love that.
Yep.
Thanks, Mark.
Yep.
All right. So, Travis, let's get over to you. Give us an overview of your brand, technology, operational challenges, all the questions.
All right. So I would say on the brand and technology side, essentially since 2017, we've been able to DrayMaster provide, easy way for drayage truckers to digitally handle all their rates, making it quicker, more accurate pricing for the quoting process, and then all while keeping full control of who has access to those rates and when. From how have we evolved? I would say it's actually surprising to some, but we deal with a lot of people that still manage their rates on a spreadsheet.
What?
And all the time. So with that said, the rating process used to be in a person's head or even legacy knowledge. Later, it was stored in the spreadsheets and still today, of course. And now rates can even be stored in the TMS. So we've added more capabilities to simplify the communication with the customers, and expectations rose, and also 3PLs to manage all their drayage partners in one centralized location. So less touch points, helping both sides of the platform. And then I would say with the operational challenges, not everyone, but many of the carriers and freight brokers that we work with don't understand their actual costs and often struggle with pricing consistency across the organization. So that's a big one. And this leads to them spending excessive amounts of time generating a quote, completing an RFP, confirming availability, and handling all the invoice discrepancies that come with that. So does not account for the inefficiency and extra costs and resources to handle that process either.
Yeah, so many barriers to success.
There is.
Right? I mean, you could be so much more successful if you're not using that spreadsheet, and there could be human error when it comes to that as well. Like, there's so many different things that you have to have your pulse on to make sure that you are successful from an invoicing perspective. And everybody wants to be successful from an invoicing perspective. I mean, I remember being in logistics and having to create an invoice and forgetting a line item.
Exactly. And then being able to have everyone within the organization understand that and be able to quote a rate if they need to.
Well, that is very true. I remember having to wait like a week to get some overseas charges, just to be able to quote somebody, and by that time I've lost the business.
Exactly. Yeah. First to market.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Just a reminder, if you have any questions throughout the conversation, make sure to put it in the comments. We're definitely going to get to those a little bit later. So you've all framed the challenges so well. It's time to talk about solutions. And we are, of course, talking today about 3 big trends shaping the future of intermodal trucking technology. So let's find out what they are and the impact they're going to have for organizations and for the industry as a whole. So number one of the biggest trends, I guess, or number one trend, is digitization. Now we hear this word all the time, but when we talk about digitization in the context of drayage, what do we mean by that? Like, what aspects should it actually cover? Dennis?
Well, in the tech space, you've heard the phrase digital transformation for a while now. And
Yep.
if a drayage company has a system like Trinium, they've already kind of started along that journey, even if they don't know it, even the most basic of users, right? So from firstly internally, there's digitizing your internal operations through automated business process, through through order management, dispatch, mobile applications with geofencing capabilities and electronic PODs for the drivers. And then how that all flows through and connects to the back office for like digital invoicing with electronic documents, and then automation when it comes to carrier and driver settlements. And then outside of that, outside the 4 walls of the trucking business, you have enabling to digitally connect to things like automated tracing, connecting with your customers digitally, your vendors, your partners. And that can be various means, through APIs, through EDI, and various other means.
What about you, Travis?
Yeah, as we've been discussing digitization isn't new, but now we're seeing it extend into more and more aspects and into deeper quarters of freight movement and drayage operations in general. So it's really fine tuning and maximizing the optimization and I would say automation of a freight move and how a drayage business interacts with their customers. So the example I use, phase one, maybe that's just digitizing the rates. Phase two could be more about facilitating the back and forth during the quoting and confirming shipment process. And then phase three is really potentially giving your customers direct access to the rates and the ability to quote and book a shipments all by themselves, which obviously leads to that automation portion.
Well, and I like how you broke it down like that, right? Because a lot of times, supply chain professionals, supply chain teams, leaders, they get overwhelmed because it's like, I need to do all the things all at once and it needs to be done by tomorrow. But no, you're like, there's a phase one, there's a phase two, there's a phase three, depending on what you want to focus in that particular time for that particular moment in that particular process to make it more efficient and optimized, right?
And it's easier to get the company on board with it at that point because they're understanding they're not breaking it all off at once. So yes.
Yes, little pieces. Well, Travis,
Yeah.
I'm going to come back to you. How does digitizing all aspects of the drayage move kind of address the challenges that we've been talking about so far?
Yeah, so I mean, we say it's great to reduce or even eliminate, the touch points needed to book a shipment. It also allows to be more clear, consistent, and I would say responsive communications at the beginning of the process as opposed to throughout or the end of the process. So ultimately, creating a single source of rating truth, no matter what I mentioned earlier, no matter who's quoting the business, as well as ensuring that the invoiced charges align closely with that quoted amount that was discussed in the first part of the conversation.
Well, and I think too, with all the work from home as well, you can be
Yeah,
in different parts of the country and you need to be able to have access to these things to be able to be on the same page.
exactly.
All right, Dennis, what do you think?
As Travis mentioned, removing manual touch points is key. The average dray move could have as many as 20 manual touch points.
Wow.
With the right system, the right people, the right process wrapped around it, you could shrink that down to 3 or 4. So like an 80% automate the process. So when you scale that across thousands of dray moves, you can really see how there's a lot of efficiency to be gained there.
Mhm.
A good example of that is, from a best practices standpoint, we have some customers that are achieving an 80% threshold of their orders that are being digitally processed into Trinium versus some companies that are still manually keying in all their orders. So you can see how that customer service time on the more automated operation, the customer service staff are freed up to do more value-adding things for maybe dispatch operations or maybe doing more value-adding things for the customer directly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and freeing up people to be doing some of the things that they want to be doing, right? Which helps with team retention, right?
Absolutely.
Employee retention.
Yes.
And Mark, we're going to bring you back in the conversation in just a little bit, but I have
Yeah,
one
no
more
worries.
question for Dennis and Travis. How do we approach digitization with things like budgets, timeframes, staffing? What should organizations be prioritizing and thinking about? Because I hear all the time when it comes to onboarding, do we have enough of our IT time available if it's needed to be able to onboard a new technology? So Dennis, I'm going to start with you and then go to Travis.
Our recommendation really has always been that drayage companies should have a deliberate strategy to digitize their operations. And it should come from ownership and executives. You need to have somebody who's really in charge of that. Larger companies, they'll have staff, but also we see some quality people within the small to medium-sized businesses who have kind of been deputized to do this. They prioritize their projects internally. They implement improvements in this area in really bite-sized chunks. And to do it that way, it really alleviates some of the change management stress that you put on your internal teams, your drivers, and your customers. So nominate somebody and then prioritize internally and then incrementally implement.
Amazing. Travis?
Yeah, I touched a little bit on this earlier, but I'm going to first and foremost is be honest with yourself and benchmark, how much it goes back to understanding cost, benchmark how much time you're spending on quoting and the invoicing process. Then I would say prioritize the understanding of your rates and what goes into them from, the basics of line haul, fuel, tolls, chassis charges like positioning and rental. And once it's understood, then the next piece is making sure that information is communicated consistently across the organization, because you need everyone on the same page. And as soon as that time-consuming process has a better flow to it, then I would say you can start moving into the deeper areas of your business, like to your point, Sarah, driver retention, better customer collaboration, or wherever you need to focus your time at the moment. And the last thing I'd say is just keep in mind that the result of digitizing the process, it still keeps the rates out of your competitors' hands, unlike today when using spreadsheets.
Yeah, that is true. And I think also to keep in mind ROI. ROI isn't always just about money saved. And it can be money saved in a variety of different ways, from the time that your team's spending on spreadsheets and different things like that. So when you're thinking about budgets around technology, how long is it taking your team to do certain tasks, right? So many other things to think about when it comes to that budget.
It does, absolutely. And who's doing the quoting, and just making sure it's understood how, for example, tolls, where are the pulling from? Is it from live data? Are you throwing a
Right.
number in the air? Things like that.
Well, yeah, and sometimes like those demerge costs and things like that can come 6 months down the road. Then what?
Exactly.
Then what do you do?
Right.
Somebody's got to pay that bill.
Yep. And it's going to take time and money to go back and have the back and forth.
Absolutely. All right. So number 2 trend is collaboration. Now, this one's after my own heart. As you can see behind me, I say collaboration is the future of business. And so I want to ask each one of you, what does it mean for Drayage? What does collaboration mean for Drayage? And who are we talking about? Are we talking about internal stakeholders, external partnerships, clients, competitors? Who do we want working together in collaboration? I'm going to start with you, Dennis, and go to Mark.
Well, within the intermodal space, the collaboration is natural. It's the intersection between the different modes of transportation, ocean, rail, and trucking has always been part of the business. But we've seen improvements in collaborative efforts, mainly between marine terminals and railroads with the drayage community. And a lot of that is fostered by some of the associations. So some of the local associations like the Harbor Truckers Association in Southern Cal, or the Intermodal Association of Chicago, or the national associations like Guyana, continuing to foster collaboration amongst all the stakeholders. We've also seen, increased collaboration between drayage companies and their large customers, forming more and more of a partnership relationship. All this leads to, better cooperation that could lead to additional business value, like better system connectivity opportunities and things like that.
And it I think overall, just better for the industry when everybody is sort of talking to each other. I don't know about sharing that data just yet. I don't think we're there, but at least talking to each other and collaborating. Sorry, Dennis.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there.
Okay, good. Mark, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, when you think of, we're talking through the whole process, and for, SecurSpace customers, right, they're using the marketplace, that collaboration happens. It's back and forth. Here's what I need, here's what it's going to cost. So that part of it between the two parties, the buyer and supplier, really happens naturally within the marketplace. So, but if you add to that, how that streamlines the process for them, again, making it easier and simpler, it also provides them with the ability to let their customers know where equipment is, right? Where is that container that has my merchandise on it, for example, right? And if which we'll talk about in a minute with interconnectivity, but I mean, if they're integrated to the TMS, well, then all that information kind of flows through. So not only do we see when it came off, where it was in the port, where it is now being stored, so that really enters in the external collaboration to the teams that are, using the platform. So really, it's everyone.
Yeah, everybody. All right, Travis, what do you think?
I would say with collaboration, it's going to relate to all parties that you mentioned, and depend on where each company is within their own journey. As far as the quoting process goes, a more collaborative approach can, and we've seen this, can and will typically yield more and repeat business. And in that scenario, obviously, it's a win-win situation. Especially when you think about, to Pick's point, how much back and forth is usually associated with trying to quote a lane. And throughout this whole time, it's not guaranteed to get the shipment, like I've mentioned before, but it's time consuming and frustrating on both sides. So we get it. But by putting all the known charges up front on every quote you process and putting this information at your customer's fingertips, it's going to make for a more collaborative relationship, and it's going to provide your customer with a better overall experience anyways.
And think about how many emails we can save in your inbox. I mean, I don't know anybody who doesn't want less emails. I am one of them. So, Mark, I'm going to come to you. Why? Right? I'm going to ask you why. What impact will collaboration have in this space, particularly when thinking about the market outlook and the challenges that we've talked about?
I think it really comes back to transparency, visibility, right? I mean, talked about it a little bit. If everyone within the supply chain needs to know where things are, that level of transparency, it's actually here in that yard. Knowing the cost up front, whether that's booked in the beginning and you know it's moving there, or it's a last minute decision, it really just gives a better customer experience throughout the process.
Yeah, it's just kind of better for everybody. Again,
Yep.
who doesn't want less emails? And Dennis,
Exactly.
I kind of alluded to this earlier, but how do we bring everybody together seamlessly? You said that we're almost there. Are we really almost there? Do people really want to collaborate and share?
Yeah, we're seeing some signs of that, and I think it's being fostered, and it improves every year. If we were talking about collaboration and data sharing 7, 8, 10 years ago, it's completely unheard of. But nowadays, we're starting to see more and more of that, and I think it's due to some of the relationships and that are fostered through these associations, and we're all serving. All these companies are serving the same BCO. So even though they might not be a customer-vendor relationship, that third-party stakeholder, they're also serving the BCOs who want the connectivity, they want the data, and they want the visibility. So there's been a lot more cooperation.
So let's talk about number 3, which is interconnectivity, which you kind of alluded to, Dennis. What do we mean by interconnectivity, and how does that differ from actual collaboration?
Really, if you think about it, interconnectivity is really a byproduct of collaboration. It's one thing to connect, to have some connectivity between a customer-vendor relationship, but it's a whole different ballgame to try to get third-party stakeholders to connect. So like I mentioned years ago, it's kind of unheard of that marine terminals and rails would be sharing data with the drayage community. Now that trend is here. We have plenty of marine terminals and railroads who have open APIs. Now, this isn't top secret data. This is data that's available on their website, but we get it in a streamlined way where we can connect it into third-party systems like Trinium. It has a lot of value, enables a lot more productivity from a Trinium customer drayage company's perspective.
Interesting. You would think that some of that data is, definitely not something that people want to share, but it is, like you said, available on the website. So why aren't we sharing? So let's talk about the role that data and visibility do play in the success of interconnectivity. Travis, we're going to start with you.
I would say, this comes into connecting with a TMS, for example. So by centralizing the quoting process, connecting the TMS, this is going to give trucking companies a better understanding of what lanes they're quoting and how often they're quoting lanes with a specific customer, what they may or may not see the business from. And now you throw in the connection to their TMS, and they start to understand what lanes they have actually been awarded versus what they've just quoted and may not see anything on. And it goes back to what I mentioned earlier about just understanding your own rates. And by having the data available, it's going to give the trucker the opportunity to reach out, collaborate with their customers or prospects, and what needs to happen to be awarded more business. Previously, we talked about partnerships. I think it's crucial that, the customers and the truckers create more of a partnership than they do just a quoting process. It's going to help for times when we run into something like COVID.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think the data also helps with the conversation that you're having with the clients as well. You can bring more to the table when you're having those conversations. Now, it seems that LinkedIn might be crashing for a few people. If that's happening, head over to Let's Talk Supply Chain on YouTube, because we're also streaming over on our YouTube channel as well. Dennis, I want to bring you into this conversation about data and visibility. I mean, we talk about visibility all the time. I feel like visibility is a word that people use all the time. So talk to us about what you think.
Yeah, it is. It's a demand in our industry, and it's hit the drayage companies. And, when you look at the intermodal space, you naturally have, data that's housed in disparate systems. With this trend of openness, the drayage companies, they need to be able to push and pull data from various sources. For example, our Trinium Availability Manager service, which is our container tracing system, we pull data from 70 different sources. So we can pull that data into Trinium and present it in a meaningful way so that dispatchers have visibility, and then also they can push this data out to their BCO and 3PL customers. So from a visibility standpoint and a data processing standpoint, from a connectivity to customers, it's gotten to the extreme where we've seen an actual trend where drayage companies are actually more heavily scrutinized by their customers on the quality and accuracy of the data, even more so than on the on-time performance of the actual container deliveries themselves.
Absolutely. Mark, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I mean, just to add, visibility is the word we hear all the time, as we said. It is important. I would say one of the keys, though, as we talked about the interconnectivity of the systems, is really not only just sharing the data, but being able to show it to a user in their context, right? Whether it's someone in the TMS who's about to book a shipment and wants to see maybe what space is available because they know when it arrives, they're not ready to take it. Or maybe it's last minute, right? And I need to have visibility. Oh, ship is there, containers are coming off. I need to know when to move it or when it's available to move. So, it's that. And then I would say the interconnectivity, I think, will drive, things like more predictive, like the system being able to say, okay, it's off the ship. It's been there for 2 days. We're about to start getting charged. You need to think about doing something with it. Right? Take it off the port, bring it to your warehouse, or find some less expensive storage. So I think all those things in the interconnectivity, we talk about it as visibility, but really it is in the context of the user, what they need to see.
Yeah, we need that sort of warning button. Warning, warning, it's about to go into detention and demurrage. You need to come and pick it up today. And you think in 2024 that we could, do things last minute, right? Because things happen all the time. Supply chain is all about problem solving. And so you would think that we should be able to do that in 2024. So Dennis, what's the impact? Why is it such an important solution moving forward?
Well, from a drayman's perspective, like I mentioned, kind of a never-ending stream of demands for visibility and connectivity that they have to deal with. So they have to have systems and processes in place to be able to accommodate that. And the various ways to accommodate it, could be EDI, could be through APIs, but investing in the right technology to enable this is really key. From a broader perspective within the WiseTech group, to give you an example of kind of an ecosystem that we've developed, is we've got CargoWise, which is the largest freight forwarding application in the world, and that's connected to Bloom, which is a logistics execution platform. And then Bloom is connected to all 4 of the Drayage TMSs in the family. So we have Profit Tools, Trinium, CompCare, and GTG to give you that ecosystem. So connectivity permeates throughout all that, and that's all within the WiseTech umbrella. And it's all focused on meeting the interconnectivity demands from large BCOs, 3PLs, forwarders.
Yeah, because they're asking for it. That's what they want, right? And they want the data to be flowing through. They don't want a tech stack where they have to pull and sort through data from all sorts of different locations. So let's turn our attention to some of the results. Let's talk about some case studies. This is always my favorite part because we get to paint a picture of what's going on. So I'm going to ask each one of you to share how your customers are leveraging your drayage technologies to tackle these challenges, streamline operations, boost profitability. So Dennis, I'm going to start with you. Paint us a picture. What was the challenge that a client came to you with? What was the solution? What was the ROI and benefit to them?
The majority of our customers deploy Trinium with the goal of gaining productivity to enable growth. So whether it's growth in volume, being able to handle more volume, grow revenues, grow profits. We recently posted a case study where a customer that grew their operation from 12 trucks to over 100 trucks, noting that the system was a key enabler to achieving that. Now, this company also, as I mentioned, also had good business processes that they wrapped around the system, and they had good super users. So all 3 of those kind of creating the solution effect there. So really a nice ROI story there. And we have other customers focused really on cost reduction, as I mentioned, If you don't have your arms around per diem and demurrage and rail storage and things like that, your margins are squeezed further. And then, the customer satisfaction side of things, where a lot of our customers have a technology centric approach, where they'll wrap the technology into their sales and marketing pitch to their customers to enable them to retain customers and also go out and get more business, win more deals due to the fact that you have technology in place. And then one of the more things we overlook, though, is the driver side of things. And we have a lot of case studies where the customers say the driver application really creates some good retention, and it's a recruiting tool. So it enables the drivers that our mobile app connected directly to our TMS, where the driver's day is a lot more convenient and a lot easier as we enable a lot of automation where the drivers are transacting with the trucking company. In a lot of cases, owner operators, that's a big sales pitch for our customers.
Well, especially if you're going, I think you said 12 trucks to 100?
Yeah.
In what span of time was that? Like, that's a lot.
Yeah, that was over, they grew that over, I think, 4 years total. Yeah, so they incrementally went from like 12 to 40 within a year.
Wow.
And it really has as a growth enabler. So that's a really good story.
Well, and you need drivers for those as well, right?
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
the driver retention really would make a big deal for them to be able to keep drivers, bring drivers into the family to be able to grow that quickly. Well, thank you very much for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
Now, Mark, talk to us about SecurSpace. Give us a case study.
Sure. I'll take two and I'll keep them pretty short. But so on the buy side, we had a large online retailer who was bringing in containers on the East Coast in the Newark port. And it was probably, I'll just say, thousands of containers. And they needed some place to stage all of them before bringing them to the warehouses. And they wanted them off the port as quickly as they could. So it allowed them to avoid the demurrage charges because they were getting them off the ports pretty quickly and staging them in some unutilized space that one of our suppliers had. Security of all the equipment and the containers. They knew where they were, 24/7 surveillance. They could get in and out 24/7 during the day and take containers in and out. So it gave them easy and quick access and really allows them to overall manage their costs. They're a retailer, right? Costs are big. Every penny counts, and they were able to do that. And then from the supply side, there's actually a video on our site of the supplier. They were really able to expand locations to 7. So they had some property, they've expanded it. But one of the things that allowed them to do that was they were able to better utilize space, right? And generate revenue as they expanded their business. And they are now 7 locations. They're generating revenue from all of them, and all of that is going through the marketplace.
So I think the key to both of those stories is really flexibility.
Yep.
Too. You're able to provide each one of your clients flexibility depending on what they're looking for, right? It's not one size fits all for every client.
Right. Some people will be last minute. This one was ahead of time. They knew what was coming in. They knew months ahead they needed the space. They found it through one of our suppliers, contracted it, and it all worked out.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Now, before we go to Travis for DrayMaster, I just want to remind everybody, if you have a question, now is the time to put it in the comments, because we definitely are going to have a few minutes to get to those at the end of the conversation. So Travis, over to you. Paint us a picture of DrayMaster.
Yeah, so we've got a few different case studies on both sides, freight forwarding side and the trucker side. The one that sticks out the most for me is the trucker side of the business. And we had a trucker come to us that responded to all their emails by phone or email, and so they got set up with us. A week before we went live, we measured the quote responses by doing nothing but sending out the emails as they typically would. 90% of those customers responded asking for a discount of some kind, whether it was line haul fuel or something else.
90%?
90%.
That's a big number.
That is. And after going live, the following week, we had them respond with nothing but a DrayMaster quote that was generated from the system, and not a single customer asked for a decrease. And with that, it comes into play because the truckers are with DrayMaster providing all the known charges up front. It's in an easy to read format, and it's also going to account for any accessorials that may come into play, even if it's charges that are on the day of the move. So there's no hidden fees, and I think that's where a lot of truckers will end up hiding costs to make up the difference for what they may lose understanding the quoting process. And, so with that, not only have they lowered their, did not have to lower their price, they're preserving their margin, and they've now gone on to automate a majority of their quoting processes.
Well, I go back to what I said about reducing the number of emails in your inbox. I mean, that is a very good example. If you've got 90% of customers coming back looking for a discount, that's a lot of emails to sift through. And you're going from 90% to 0. I mean, I'd like to see that in my inbox.
Spending more time to lose more money.
We're going to have to put that on a t-shirt or something. I really like that quote. All right. Well, before we move on to the Q&A, we started the session looking at the current market outlook, but I want to talk about the future. What do you think some of the future trends are coming up for 2024 or 2025 that we should be looking out for? Travis?
That's loaded. It's all over the place. I'm going to say, I think we're going to start seeing more and more companies taking the next step after digitizing their rates, because digitizing's got to be the first. After that, they're going to go into some type of rating automation, because it's first to market that's going to start winning a lot of this business. It's going to be important that, for the ongoing frustrations of the manual handling of multiple and large RFPs, this is going to come into play as well. And looking further down the road, I feel that in drayage in general, we're going to need to start looking at and testing dynamic pricing. I know that can scare a lot of people, but I think that's the direction that's going to have to go. But in order to get to dynamic pricing, you're going to have digitized your rates.
So get ready now, folks, because it is coming.
Yes.
All right, Mark, what do you think are the trends that we need to look out for?
I mean, it's hard to call it a trend maybe, but there's a lot going on in the world now, right? And it'll be interesting as we watch in 2024 and into 2025 how those impact the supply chain. They will. I don't know that we'll hopefully not see something like COVID again, but all those things, even just with Baltimore, those need to go somewhere else, right? Those container ships that were going into Baltimore, and now those containers may need someplace to be. I think this constant, as you put it, just change that's happening all the time in supply chain, being able to use information and systems to better react to it, so it doesn't overwhelm, any company or the system in general. I think we're going to see that kind of volatility for a little while.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think disruption's ever going to stop coming out of our mouths as supply chain professionals, to be honest. Just as things get more complex and complicated and, different things happening around the world. All right, Dennis, you've got the last word on this one. What do you think?
Positive trend. We see more and more, openness. We see more and more collaboration. We see more and more sharing of data, and we see that continuing. It's probably been like a 5-year trend, and now it's hopefully, soon it'll be normal for stakeholders within the industry to provide APIs to exchange data. From a challenges standpoint, we're looking at probably the driver classification issues permeating outside of California, and also, drayage trucking companies having to deal with electric truck mandates as being a business issue. And then a recent trend that that just came out, I think May, it's effective, is where the per diem and demurrage invoices are now going to be sent invoiced to the BCO from the ocean carrier, not to the drayage operator.
Right.
Now, it's still generally being seen as a good thing for the drayage community, but the earliest prognostications are the drayage community will still have to audit, dispute, and pay those invoices, but generally it could be a good thing for drayage operators.
That is definitely a good thing. We don't have to act like a bank.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, could be.
All right. Well, let's get to some of our audience questions. If you haven't had a chance to ask your question, now is the time to put it in the comments, but we have a couple from you. So the first question that I see is, do you see the volatility of the market to affect RFP and quote timing and seasonality of drayage trucking? Who wants to take that one?
Since it's quoting, I can take that one. And I do actually get this question quite often, but I would, even 10, 15 years ago, I thought we could always plan on a peak season around the same time every year, with several changes, obviously, that we've talked about today, even in the industry and things happening around the world. It's gone to more of a send as you need it type process, which is going to go back to full circle here of why you need to digitize your rates. We don't know when it's going to happen, but when it does, and you get hit with a list of 2,000 rates that you need returned, it's going to be a lot easier to respond with your rates digitized and being able to provide that quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with all of that. All right. The second question that I see here, we are a smaller carrier with a limited budget. How can we start down this path?
I can take that one. Most software today is really available as a service with a monthly fee. So you don't have to go out and purchase hardware and peripheries and things like that. It's really a low upfront cost. And the monthly fees they usually correlate with the size of the business. For example, we have customers with 5-10 trucks. We have customers with 1,000 trucks. So in most cases, the TMSs are also priced by the size of the business and are affordable and practical to implement. So you have to be able to get one that's affordable and also practical to implement.
Great. Okay. Another question that I'm seeing here: what markets have the biggest demand for parking and storage space?
I can take that one, Sarah. So I think probably obvious in some ways, West Coast, LA, probably the busiest port in the U.S. right now. And properties at a premium, real estate's at a premium there, especially in and around the port. And then I would say number 2 behind that really has been the East Coast, that New York, Newark. Again, same reasons, maybe not just for volume coming in, but for storage. There's just not a lot of real estate there. Being able to take advantage of space that was unutilized now is even more important. So I would say those are probably the 2 biggest markets, and others, Savannah, Georgia, those are coming up and being used more. But I would say New York on the East Coast and LA on the West Coast, probably the biggest.
Great. Okay. Thank you. So we've also got a question from Mark. How feasible will electronic orders sent through EDI be able to be automated with AI technology moving forward? Dennis, I think I'm going to forward that one over to you.
I had some audio there. Can you repeat that one?
Sure. How feasible will electronic orders sent through EDI be able to be automated with AI technology moving forward?
This, as far as EDI and using AI tools, we're starting to use those as well. Whether you're looking at the vast majority of the orders within this space are still coming in via email and a PDF attachment. So in a lot of cases, what we've done is automate that order processing through an OCR technology, where we'll scrape those documents and pull those in and create an electronic order out of that. Hopefully, we get to a point where the orders are all coming from the customers in an EDI form or an API type form, and we don't have to do that. But probably 70-80% of the orders in this space are still through a PDF. So you're going to have to utilize that digital documentation to upload within the TMS.
Great. Okay, so it doesn't look like we have any more audience questions. So I want to ask you one more thing before we go. What's one thing that you would like the audience to walk away thinking about or taking action on from this discussion? Dennis?
I actually probably a few things. It's continue to evaluate and adopt tech in the space. Evaluate what you can, adopt what you can. Within the TMS that you could be using, evaluate the functionality you're not using. It's kick the tires on things like DrayMaster and SecurSpace that may be newer to the industry as well. And then get involved from a collaborative standpoint within the industry associations. Those industry associations really are the key relationship stakeholders within the space for marine terminal and rails that have opened up and have actually providing more and more data. And then the connectivity piece, pursue the connectivity, try to get digitally connected with as many of your vendors and your customers and your partners that you can.
Well, and I think you made a really good point there, to have your voice heard.
Yes.
It's one thing to be able to be, in your organizations complaining about different things. It's another to actually get involved in the industry, have your voice heard, and make that impact or the change that you want to see. So I really love that advice. Thank you, Dennis. So that brings us to the end of today's LinkedIn Live. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. Thank you for all the questions. We've loved reading them. It's great to get a feel for what really matters to you. And thank you so much for joining me, Travis, Mark, and Dennis. I really enjoyed getting to know each of your respective brands and how they're changing the game for drayage customers. And when we talk about collaboration, the three of you have shown us how it's done with just this discussion. And if you want to find out more about these amazing companies, you can visit securespace.com, triniumtech.com, and envasetechnologies.com. Plus, we have added the links to the comment section so you can click and go directly to those websites. Thanks again for everybody watching. Travis, Mark, Dennis, thank you so much again for joining me.
Thanks,
you.
Sarah. Appreciate it.